Hi, everybody. We're back again with the Your Fab Life podcast from legallyfab.com. We have the pleasure of interviewing today Dr. Simira Freeman. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, absolutely. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So for our audience that doesn't obviously already know you, could you give our audience a background on like where you went to school and what your focus practice is right now with your therapy and your counseling?
I am a psychologist. I'm licensed in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and California. I work with children and families. I do a great amount of work with them, but I also work with a lot of couples as well around relationships, interpersonal things, transitions that people experience in their lives. So I do a lot of work in those areas. I've been to school many, many times. I feel like I have a lot of hats, both in education and psychology as well. So I would say I'm not jack of all trades, but I do work very closely and intimately with children, their families, and just individuals trying to find their way in life, dealing with various things that life has to kind of throw at you.
Well, that's a great transition for the name and the subject matter of the podcast today. Our podcast talks today about 5 mental health tips for professional women. Most people that listen to this podcast, again, are professional women, either single women that are balancing life, or even women that are married and have families, but they're still trying to balance everything and be superwoman and say yes to everybody. And so I think these 5 mental health tips will definitely benefit the audience, will obviously benefit me. It's also a struggle for me to just have a balance sometime. So with that being said, we're gonna jump right into the 5 mental health tips that you've recommended. So the first one is think about your actual needs. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, definitely. I think that in order for you to kind of figure out how you're going to support your needs, you need to actually spend some dedicated time figuring out what they are, right? It's difficult to protect your needs and assert boundaries and all those things that we'll talk about a little bit later when you don't even really know what your needs are. So I think spending dedicated time just figuring out like what's going on for me, like really just taking time to pause, especially for busy professional women like myself and like you, Jay. I think that it's very important that we carve out time to actually do that so that you have the time, bandwidth, mental space to spend a little time decompressing and also I think breaking down what is going on in your life and what kinds of things are stressful, what kinds of things are triggers, so that you can identify some of what your actual needs are. Because without knowing what they are first and being clear about them, it makes it harder to figure out a plan for how to support yourself and how to get those needs like met. So I think that's really, really, really important.
And this is good because even when I sit here and I think about what you're saying, I'm like, okay, what is one of my needs? I know a big need of mine is just having quiet time.
Mhm.
That is a need for me, because it's like the minute my alarm goes off at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, a lot of times I'm working off of East Coast and West Coast time.
Yeah.
I'm like immediately like into work, and I said, you know what? No, the first part of my day is not going to be checking an email,
Yeah.
taking a call, checking social media. Like I need to carve out some quiet time. So I
Absolutely.
recognize that was and it's something that I've been pretty consistent with. I think at
Mhm.
least for the last 2 months of just making sure I have that quiet time in the beginning. Another example, I think a lot of us have, negative people maybe in our lives, or people that are toxic, and they're not bad people, but maybe they only complain. Maybe they never have anything positive to say. So, maybe it's a need to, maybe just have less of those conversations, because it really does get in your spirit, a lot of the negativity that, is going on even in the world,
Yeah.
let alone in people's lives. So yeah,
Yeah.
these are just some example of needs, so what do you need? So once someone has identified what they need, you then say, list your triggers. Your
Yes, right. So once you figure out what you need, like I agree with you. I definitely am someone who needs quiet and alone time. I think people probably would categorize me as somewhat like an extrovert, but I actually like to spend a lot of time on my own, just sort of decompressing and spending time alone to recharge. And that's what I mean in terms of what your needs are. Like what are the things that you need to do for yourself to help you recharge, help you refocus, help you get recentered? Because like I said, again, if you don't know what they are, then you certainly can't do them in order to get yourself back on track. To the second part of that is I think has a lot to do with coming up with a plan for how you're going to actually get some of those needs met. So there's several different things that we touched on before we spoke. So which one would you like me to start with?
Well, in terms of listing a trigger, can you give our audience an example of like something that is a problem for someone, and then show like an example of what a trigger would be?
Right. So essentially, I think triggers are the things that I identify as things that are emotionally and energetically draining for you. So whether it's like you said, it sounded like when in some of your examples, like maybe even attacking emails right at the first start of the morning could be a trigger to unsettling you for the rest of the day, getting you sort of maybe too sped up before you get the day started. So triggers would be, I think, things that you identify as after they happen or when they're happening, you can feel your battery kind of just getting more and more depleted. Whether it's like a social engagement and interaction with, like you said, individuals that are having that situation, or if it's a set of experiences or responsibilities that are sort of like overwhelming, identifying what those things are that put you in a place where you're sort of, I feel like, at an emotional deficit, right? So what are those things that are happening? Is it, for example, I know the holidays are coming up for a lot of people. The holidays and seeing family that you haven't seen in a while, especially with everything that's going on, could be very triggering for a lot of people for various different reasons. Maybe it's even just the idea of traveling during all of this pandemic, this situation. Maybe it's just traveling in general, like whatever it is, you want to identify what some of those things are that get you to a place where you're feeling unsettled, where you're feeling dysregulated, where you're feeling, like I said, emotionally depleted or tapped out. Because again, if you know what those things are, then you can start to plan. So first you identified what your need is, like, okay, I need, let's say, alone time in order to feel settled and recharged. So if then you identify that, like, well, during that, Thanksgiving dinner, everyone's going to be at the house and it's going to be a whole long marathon of situations, and it's going to be, and someone's going to ask me to go pick up this and go get that. And you can already foresee that that's probably going to happen, and it's going to put you at a place where you're going to be triggered, but you may not be able to get that need met. Then what you can do is plan ahead for that. Like maybe I show up to Thanksgiving dinner at this time because I'm not there during the chaotic preparation time that's going to be happening all before everybody gets there. So maybe I plan to come at this time because I know that for me, being there in the fray of, let's say, whatever is going on and the unexpected needs of what's happening in that situation, for me right now, I just don't have the bandwidth for it. And so I make an adjustment so that I can both get my need met and be mindful of what it is that my trigger is, so that I don't show up to Thanksgiving dinner upset and grouchy and whatever else, because I'm trying to be something or be in a state that I'm not really ready to be in because I've sort of overextended myself.
Well, I think that leads to the third tip, which is making an actual boundary. So you have the need, triggers, right? That get you in that deficit. So in order to overcome these triggers, you have to make, some sort of boundary for that family member, that boyfriend, that child, that coworker, that boss. I mean, some of the women that are listening, they're very, very high demanding roles. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're teachers, they're in these professions where a lot of times it's hard to say no, which I guess is a whole nother podcast. We can do a whole podcast on saying no, right? It's the bad word. Don't tell people no. We tend to be people pleasers and things like that, especially women. I think women in general, our default button is yes. It's not no.
I had a friend say recently, no is a full sentence.
It really is. It really
Yeah.
is. And I feel like with men, they can do no more than yes. Like they're okay with saying no before yes. And we're more okay with saying yes before no. So I just think it's how we are socialized, and because we're supposed to be nurturer and caretakers. And really, women have really only been in the workplace for really 50 years. That's not really a long time. Women were not, we were always at home, and the husband, the children, or whatever, with these full-time jobs anyway. And now you have women stepping out and having careers and trying to do it all. And even women that don't have husbands and children, it's
Yeah.
still a full-time job taking care of themselves and, satisfy what they need to do to succeed professionally. So,
Yeah.
you know,
There's a
making
lot
that
of
boundary.
socialization around that, like just
Yeah.
in terms of just whether people, and I was recently talking about this with a group of young ladies, brilliant like young ladies, and we were just talking about the idea of self-advocacy and like where do you learn how to advocate for yourself and to create boundaries and how comfortable are you doing that. And we talked a little bit about how just as women of color and just as women in general, that socialization throughout various different cultures and things of that nature, it's not necessarily something that women are often encouraged to do, in terms of like identify what your needs are and then assert a boundary that speaks to what it is that your needs are before putting someone else's needs before your own, whether that be the needs of your children, your boss, your partner, or whoever it is. That often that is an unfortunate, I feel like, byproduct of some of the imaging, the socialization, the cultural norms and various things that have kind of given women the message that their needs are not as important, and so they should therefore, they should focus their intention on meeting the needs of other people before they meet the needs of themselves.
And before we move on to tip number 4, I just want to dive a little deeper into boundaries, because something that you said that I struggle with is, okay, so I'm really good at the first 3 tips, like the needs, the triggers, and then I make the boundary. But the problem is, after I make the boundary, I don't necessarily stick with it because I don't stick with the boundary necessarily because it doesn't really work for the person that I've created the boundary for. So I can be in a relationship, or I can be, this can even be with family. I say, I have a niece that's getting ready to have a baby shower. I'm not helping you with the baby shower, but what have I already done? I sent her the name of her, right. Not a lot. But, I sent her the name of her caterer for her 16th birthday because she's having a meltdown because she has no one to cater this. I sent her a link to where she can like put an invitation together. So it's not like super me helping, but it is, I'm
over
giving
the boundary.
I went over the boundary. I said I wasn't going to help. I said I was going to buy a gift, send the gift, or if I showed up, I would show up at the end of the shower because I didn't want to be around all those people. I had already set in my mind what the boundary is, and I'm already like, because I feel bad. She's having a meltdown on the phone.
All the time.
And so I find myself, how can I put it? I find myself adjusting the boundary. Same thing in my personal relationships. I'll say, okay, this is what you want. This is what I want. Okay, if it doesn't match, this is what I'm willing to do right now. And then I'll do it for a little bit. And then I find myself not doing that boundary anymore. So
yes. So let's circle back to boundaries.
So let's go quickly dive into, once we create the boundary, how do you stick with the boundary?
So I think an important, boundaries are hard because especially I feel like boundaries in love are super duper challenging. Just because there is an unspoken desire to, I think, want the best in people and to want people to have your best interest at heart and to put that in the forefront of things. But I think that something that speaks very much to boundaries is that your boundaries are your own boundaries, and like the boundaries of what somebody else thinks is appropriate or thinks is okay, especially with regards to how they treat you or regard to how many requests they put upon you. That's going to be what their perception of that boundary is. And the only person that can really hold the boundary that makes sense for you is you, right? Because like you could say, I don't want to be involved in this baby shower, for example. That's my boundary. It's stressing me out to even consider it. But the other person is going like, well, but for them, even if you communicated that, me asking you is still a boundary I'm okay with stepping over. It's not my boundary. I'm okay with let's say asking you to do something that you may or may not want to do, or let's say with the romantic situation, I still want to be in contact, so I'm still doing that because that's what I need. But you have to go back to what you need. What's working for you, and are those things still triggering for you? And I think the reason why people put their boundaries down, or they another framework that we use in terms of just sort of thinking about emotions and just sort of how we relate to one another, is that your boundaries are permeable. So like they're there, but they're not real boundaries. Like you can put things through them, around them, over them, under them. Then they're not really firm boundaries. And unfortunately, what that means is that the other person starts to set and create the boundary. That once again, you're living within and you're basing your behavior off of. When in reality, you should be basing the boundaries that work for you off of what actually works for you. So if this is what I said I needed because it's triggering for me otherwise, or it doesn't feel good for me, or it's emotionally taxing, or financially I can't do it, or I've already said that this is too much, then I have to honor that that's what I said. That's what I said I needed. And so like if you need something else from me, there's two parts to that. One, I don't feel guilty that I can't give it to you, because I need to protect my own boundary here and like preserve my own self-care in that moment. And number two, it's absolutely okay for me to say I don't like this, or I don't want this, or I don't want any more of this, or that this doesn't feel good for me. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think back to the socialization part, if someone doesn't like our boundary a lot of the time, or if somebody doesn't want to respect our boundary, or they decided they want to climb over it, or like I said, crawl under the fence, or whatever it is, that like because they have done that, we then like allow it. And you don't have to. And like I said, I think in relationships with people in general, whether people we love because they're our family members, or people that we love because they're in relationships, or people that we love because they're friends, it can be hard to set a boundary with someone that you care about when you are overthinking how they're going to respond to your boundary. And the reality is that's not your responsibility.
Right.
It's not my responsibility for you to be able to manage, digest, be okay with, understand, accept my boundary. But I have a responsibility to myself to create the boundary, especially when I've walked myself through all those parts. I know what my needs are. I know what's triggering and doesn't work for me. And I created this boundary because of the first of two aforementioned. So then why am I backing down from the boundary that I created in an effort to protect myself and keep myself healthy and keep myself well? That's just not productive for you. And the reason it's not productive for you is because if you let people go through those boundaries over and over and over again, all you're doing is taking little pieces away from yourself and from the places that you need to restore for yourself. So once again, at the end of it, you're going to be tapped out and depleted and not having what you need and not be able to do what you need to do for yourself because you've overextended, or because you've let people kind of just march on over your boundaries. So,
well, I think that's the secondary tip. I think the secondary tip really is you have to remind, the minute you find yourself going against your own boundary that you set
for them,
or they are getting ready to go across it, that you remind yourself why you set the boundary in the first place. Because if the minute you step over it, are you getting ready to spend some money that you said that you didn't have? Are you getting ready to, tap yourself out emotionally to involve yourself in a situation that may not even have anything to do with you? You didn't cause, like, just so that you can help them. I mean, and again, it's nothing wrong with, like you said, helping people. Yeah, there are some general like exceptions, I feel like, to the rule, but generally speaking,
when things are reciprocal,
I think
sometimes exceptions.
Right. I just think if it's not reciprocal, if it's not maybe like an emergency, maybe, you gotta remind yourself why you set that boundary.
Because there's always a reason.
Because there's always a reason. So before any crossing happens, remind, like, why did I set this boundary again? And then
That's right.
that's why. So this is why I can tell this person
Here it
no
is again.
again.
This is why I said I wasn't
Right.
going
This
to
is
do
why
this
I
again.
said it, because I ain't really got it. Right. Exactly. So yeah, no. So I know for me, whether in my dating relationships or especially with my family, I think it's more in my family than in my dating relationships, that I allow them to cross boundaries all the time, because I am, the lawyer in the family. I'm the responsible person in the family. So it's like, this is the person that you go to for a problem, whether it be financial or not. Like, if you have a problem, she's the lawyer of the family, go to her. And it's like, I'm not a lawyer all the time. I'm a human being.
Just a regular person.
I'm a regular person. I get tired. Sometimes I'm thinking, like, well, thank God I'm not a doctor, because they would be asking me to fill out prescriptions. I would be looking at body parts. I would be like, but I'm only an orthopedic. And they'll be like, well, you can still look at my arm. You can still look
I'm
at
an orthodontist. This is a
right. I think if I had been a doctor, it would have been the same exact thing. They would have figured out a way to, like, tap me out where they could, even with that. And so, and again, it rarely comes, right, from a vicious place, whether it's a romantic partner or a family member. I just think, again, the secondary tip under boundary should be, once you make that boundary, remind yourself why you created that boundary before you or the other person steps over it. With that being said, the fourth tip that you recommended with our audience is identify your support system and resources. So tell us a little bit more about that and examples of what a support system or a resource could look like.
So I would say that, again, because people kind of march over your boundaries, or they just tiptoe through them, or before you know it, you're like, how'd you get on this side again? So, like, I think that a big part of identifying your resource and support system is so that you can rally the troops so that you can keep those boundaries as firm as they need to be. So, like, whether it is a support social system, whether it's like, let's say, even if it's financial, right? Like, if you want to plan to do something in particular, so that it doesn't stress you out, like making a plan, like, who are your resources, who and what are your resources that you might need to tap into when you are, let's say, in not the best situation, or you emotionally need a break. So, for example, like for parents and for families, when you're feeling emotionally tapped out with your kids, or like the after school routine is just starting to tap you out, juggling the 3 kids and figuring out who's got homework and what have you, and all the things. Sometimes your resource is if you have one. Sometimes your resource is your partner. Sometimes that's speaking to that person about, we need to come up with a better system and plan, because right now, what's happening right now isn't working for me and it's tapping me out. Or if you don't have, like I said, a partner, and you're in a parenting situation, just to stick with that example, who are the other people that you can rally in? Are there aunts, are there uncles, are there friends? There are other people in your circle, in your support system, that you can tap into when you are not at your best. The reality is, we are not all at our best. I mean, nobody is. Again, the gram will tell you otherwise, but that's not the reality of life. Even for the rich and famous, it's just not. And so I think that making sure that you can identify who those people are. And if you don't have, what let's say, whether those people or situations, or even a resource could be like, I get to go to this park that I go to, and I jog there, or I take my journal and I sit by the lake, and that's something that's helpful for me. The reality is, like, it doesn't matter what the resource is, but to identify what and or who the resource is, so that you have a plan to kind of fortify your plan to protect your boundaries, and to make sure that you're not getting yourself to places where you're super tapped out and you don't have a plan to go to at that point, because that's not the best time to create a plan, when you literally are running on empty. That's not when you want to plan.
So a plan to identify, again, the support system and resources you're going to need once you're at, even before you get to the points of being tapped out or at your rope's edge, just doing it beforehand. I think an obvious resource is someone like Dr. Simira. I think a lot of times, especially in minority communities, seeing a therapist is kind of looked down upon, like, oh no, talk to Jesus, talk to your mama, keep it to yourself.
Just be strong. There's
be
that one too.
strong, that sometimes, I think it's being more embraced now, especially in
Oh
the
yeah,
African American community. But
I think so.
yeah, mental health hasn't, again, always been something that, people wanted to talk about. So people aren't even talking about it. Lord behold, you actually pay, a therapist. But if you have insurance, some of the times your insurance will actually cover it. If you find someone that's not
Yeah.
on insurance, it can be pretty reasonable. You don't have to, you can do a few hours at a time. You don't have to commit like a lot of time. You can fill out a couple of people to see who would be a good fit. But I think an obvious resource is sometimes we need to talk to people that have no skin in the game. They have no,
Yeah.
like, they're not going to have any bias because they don't have any skin in the game. They don't have anything to win or lose by giving you the advice. So I definitely recommend, and even for myself, that's something as I continue to rise in my career and grow even personally with, wanting to become a wife, wanting to become a mother, and all those things. I know I'm going to need a therapist on call, and I know I can't continue to keep calling you. So I need a neutral, person that I can pay either through my insurance or out of pocket to listen and really help me, like you said, before, maybe even before you get, some of this is preventative too, if you
Yeah,
already have a therapist.
absolutely.
So
Some of my clients are people that are thinking about a transition, life transition or processing transitions. I think, like I like to think of myself as more like a counselor and a coach than I would say a therapist, because my approach is a little bit different. Generally speaking, I kind of have like a short-term problem solving kind of approach with things. I kind of want to dig into what the specific issues are and come up sort of with like an action plan so we can move the needle and move you as well. I think therapy and counseling is great. And there's a wide range of, I would say, needs that people have. So sometimes therapy, as in long-term therapy over time, is necessary because of the mental health illness that's indicated. But what I find, I think for myself personally, the most invigorating at this moment is because I feel like is that population of people that, like you said, don't know that they could have a little bit of help to get over that hump, to get to that next place and get to that next step. And those are the people that often, a lot of times, are kind of suffering with something in silence, or having like doing that thing where they're teetering on the like, should I talk to somebody about this or not space. And I think a lot of people are in that space of like, should I, like, this is really hard, or I'm really struggling, but I'm struggling with this alone. And sort of those folks that need sort of like a push
that
over the
push
other
over
end
to
of it.
actually.
Right. But, and then to be then invigorated and empowered to figure out like, how can I tackle this particular life situation that might be over the boundaries or triggering me everywhere left and right? And how do I come up with an action plan to kind of adjust some of those things so that like whatever is happening moving forward isn't as stressful or isn't as crazy or isn't as overwhelming? Because I think there's a ton of people that fit into that bucket of need that's very different than the vast, like I said, variety of different kinds of mental health support that's out there at this time. There's definitely a group of people who fit that diaspora where it's like, I don't know if I need somebody to talk to about this, but it really is really, really hard for me.
And again, this is why, again, identifying those resources, those people, even if it's not going to be an actual therapist, maybe you do a coach instead. We
Right.
hear
I'm a
about
life
life
coach
coaches,
too.
life
Exactly.
coaches, right? So, again, it's not a one size fit all,
No.
but just identify that support system and that resource, which leads us to our fifth and final tip. Make your self-care plan. So
Mhm.
we hear that word, it's like a buzzword, self-care. I feel like it's been a popular word maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, especially with the pandemic.
Especially with the pandemic.
It was
Yeah.
like you never got a break from like the boyfriend, the husband, the kids, your work. It was always at home with you.
Right there to meet
So,
you.
right. So
Nowhere to go.
I think self-care has a new meaning now that we're in this post-COVID, post-pandemic world where, things look a lot different. So Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about like some examples of like a self-care plan. What could be in a self-care plan for someone?
I think to your point about the idea of self-care being something that's sort of like cliche these days, for me, self-care has something that's been very intimately connected to my life. As a professional woman, I was usually working anywhere from like 60 to 70-hour weeks when I worked in the public school system, supporting there. I was also an administrator. I was in grad programs. I was doing everything all the time, everywhere. And this is before the pandemic, and this is before self-care was a thing, and before everyone thought that maybe we could all use a therapist after this traumatic experience that we've all continued to live through for the last 2 going on 3 years. So I early on through like some of my research around burnout was actually very, very interested. So this is probably, I'm trying to think of how many years ago this was now at this point, probably over 10 years ago. I was very fascinated and interested in self-care and wellness around meditation, relaxation responses, and things like that. And so that's what I ended up doing a lot of my own personal research around professional women and looking at and how burnout evolves and what creates it. And so for me, self-care isn't like the cool thing to say these days because of everything that's going on, but this is like my own personal crusade. Like I think that without
That was good.
right, without like I said, radical self-care, you can run yourself into the ground. You can physically create situations for yourself where your health is not what it needs to be. Stress and exposure long term to high levels of cortisol is horrible for you. It's horrible for you on so many levels. Literally taking, just it has all kinds of implications.
Well,
And that's just one of the
the
stresses.
biggest thing is cancer. And I know people don't like to say the C word, but there are a lot of people, cancer and heart conditions. I know two men that died in their 30s because of stress. So they were in their 30s, they were healthy individuals before then. They both died from some
Yeah,
cardiac related issues because they put too much on themselves or they weren't eating
yeah.
properly and things like that. So as much as
Because
we think,
yeah,
yeah,
those boosts in the boosts in adrenaline and cortisol and things like that that are triggered through our fight and flight response, like when we're in an emergency, a life death situation, that's supposed to be short lived. It's not supposed to be this happens and I'm at this level of sort of like heightened sense all the time for an extended period of time. It's not great for us. And so like I said, for me, self-care, a big part of it is like ferociously protecting that and knowing the implications of this being really instrumental in your health and your well-being. So when I come up with a plan, for me the plan is like this is not something that I should not be prioritizing. This is something that absolutely needs to happen. So like if that means, and I've been employing this a lot and I kind of like it, the do not disturb on my phone. I don't want to hear any, blings or alerts or this or that. We don't even realize how often that happens to us, just in terms of like work alerts and emails or texts and various. We are constantly bombarded by surprise. I call them little bursts of like adrenaline by way of these messagings and texts and notifications. Think about all the different apps that are on your phone, especially if you have more than one email address, at least, there's a lot of feedback that you're always getting. And if you're in a place of position of power, authority as a professional, that can be, I want to say, 10 times that. So when you're getting emails from colleagues and coworkers or people who work for you with the latest crisis or issue or fire that needs to be put out, over time, that's a lot of stress, it's a lot of things. So when you come up with your self-care plan, I think you have to, like I said, go back to the triggers again and then
yeah,
create a plan that kind of creates a barrier between that trigger and your wellness, right? This is the trigger and this is the wellness. So like if I don't want to deal with, like for teachers and things like that, I used to tell them a lot, even when I was an administrator, like there needs to be an out of office reply at a certain point during the evening. People have to understand you are not answering emails at 10 o'clock at night about a homework assignment. Guess why? Because you should be with your family
Right.
unwinding for the day. And
Right.
so as an administrator, that was an important message for me to give the people that I was supervising, because I think it's important. Not everybody has like that same kind of situation with the work-life balance or creating that, but and everybody's work situation isn't one in which kind of values a work-life balance or
Right.
values the balance between your health and wellness and like your productivity at work, right? So just because that's the situation that you're in doesn't mean you shouldn't try to find places where, again, with the boundaries, you can create some boundaries around yourself so that you can protect that for yourself. Because sometimes it's going to be given around you through, like I said, your institution, or let's say the said relationships that we were talking about before, like with work and family and lovers and whoever else, right? Sometimes they're not going to recommend the boundary or suggest the
Right.
boundary or create the boundary. You're going to have to do that work. So I think the biggest thing in the plan, as far as setting up the self-care plan, is knowing what those triggers are and creating things that are obstacles to said triggers, so that those kinds of sort of like that influx of like, here's another thing, that gets minimized, so that
Nice.
you have time, like I said, to catch your breath. So that's definitely part of the plan. Another part of the plan I think is really important is, for me, like I said, meditation and just finding time to sit still for a
Right.
bit.
Meditation, prayer.
Right.
Some people meditate, some people pray, some people do both. I'm one of the people that do both. I need both.
Do
I
what
need
works for
prayer.
you.
I do
You do
prayer
what
and
works
I
for
do
you.
meditation. Yeah. And I also do this thing, and I'm stealing it from Issa Rae's Insecure show, Self-Care Sunday. So, I know for you, this is, self-care is a lifestyle, but for me, it's like I'm not there yet where it can be like an everyday thing. So like I dedicate
Baby
certain other
steps.
parts of the day, or I set a day aside to do certain things. So like
Yeah.
Sundays, I tend to wash my hair, I do facials, I sage my house with all the haters and the negativity and the energy, right? So that's like my Sunday routine without fail. If I don't go to a church service, maybe I'll listen to a sermon on TV or online. Like that one day of the week, I know if I don't have any other 6 days, I don't know what's gonna happen. But on this day, I know this is a routine for me. And I think that's part of self-care, creating
Yeah,
some sort of
it
routine, even if
is.
it is just like one day a week,
And
even
if you
just
fall off the wagon, you come
right.
back to your
It's fine
routine.
because you've already set the routine. You can easily go back to something you've created if you've already created it. I mean, I
Exactly.
can tell people now, I'm like, no matter what, I'm gonna go and get like a manicure and a massage every 2 weeks, no matter what. Like
That's
that's
great.
just something I want to do for myself. So like, yeah, I think it's just creating some sort of, whether you fall off the wagon here and there or not, but like just creating the actual routine, picking a day, picking an afternoon, something somewhat regular. And what's cool about it is like you look forward to it. Like I look forward to saging my house on
Yes.
Sunday. I look
Yes.
forward to, at night, I like candles all over my house. My house is
Love
just
candles.
flooded with candles at night. So you come into my house, it looks like Christmas all year round. Like it's just white lights, white lights, white lights, because that in itself gives me this feeling of just like the world being right and balanced and
I
peaceful
love
and
Christmas
all is
lights
right with
too.
the world. Yeah. So
They're
like
like my
even just
secret
like burning
guilty
a
pleasure.
candle. Right, because like burning a candle and taking a bath doesn't really cost anything, right? So other
Sure
than like buy
doesn't.
the
It
candle,
really
right,
doesn't.
right.
Something I
But
love is
mm,
I love what do you call it? The infusers, like the oil, the essential oil
mm,
infusers. I love those. I have some really amazing fragrances, and I just love to sort of just have the fragrance and the smell and all of it just kind of like get you all in the mood and to the mood to relax. And yeah, definitely. I
and
agree.
something else I know that you like, and for people that are on the West Coast that are listening or near beaches, warm weather,
Oh, I
you
love
are
it.
near a beach. If you are near a beach year round, you have the opportunity to do something for free. Get in your car, go to the beach, even if it's not the hottest day to get in the water. In fact, today, that's
Yeah.
what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive to the beach. I'm just going to do a walk, like take advantage of just
The
God's
resources around
nature, the
you
resources around you. Exactly. That don't even cost anything. Right.
don't cost you
So,
anything.
yeah, definitely. I think all of that goes into, like you said, identifying a resource or making it, like you said, a part of the routine of your self-care.
Yes,
Like
I
all
love
of
the
those things.
ocean. It's
Yeah.
definitely important. I try to get out to the ocean as often as possible. I've obviously been in back and forth to Cali since I am licensed there as well. And I do plan to get out there soon. I'm definitely going to need to get to the beach. And I agree with you.
Yes.
It's not always something at times about just being in the water. Sometimes I just enjoy looking at it. It's
Just
very
looking
calming.
at it. Yes. It can be very hypnotic. It can be very calming.
Yeah.
So yes. So with that being said, can you tell our audience where they can find you on social media, your
Sure.
website? Yes, please tell our audience. So
Yes,
where are
yes.
you on social media?
So I am new-ish to social media. So I will say that. I think I really only decided to join social media probably sometime during the pandemic. So I would say my account is young,
Mhm.
but you can follow me at Dr. Simira. That's Dr. Simira, Dr. Simira on Instagram. And my website is www.chase solutions. That's Chase spelled CHAISE solutions.com. And I have a podcast, and I also have some
And your
videos
podcast is
from
from
my
My
couch to
Couch to
yours with
Yours.
Dr.
Yes,
Samira. Yes,
with
yes,
Dr.
yes.
Samira. Yes.
They tend to be like shorter clips of sort of just like tips and musings. So if you don't have a ton of time, that's okay. You can give yourself about 15, 20 minutes. Usually that drive to work is just enough time to get a tip. I talk about lots of different things, parenting hacks, relationships hacks, all kinds of different things. So yeah, you can check me out on those platforms. I'm also searchable on ZocDoc and on Psychology Today also.
Great, great. So I just want to recap for our audience because you know I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a teacher, so I like to repeat myself. Some guys are like, "Stop repeating yourself. I heard you the first time. I can't help it."
But
So,
I'm not sure you did. Hold on. You might have stepped over my boundaries.
so
Wait a minute.
just so that the audience just can remember everything we talked about in a nutshell. You are going to 1, think about your needs. 2, list your triggers. 3, make your boundaries. 4, identify your support system and resources. And then 5, make that self-care plan. So
Yes.
those are our 5 tips for today. We appreciate you coming on to discuss them with our audience that's listening or even watching a clip of this podcast. And everyone, again, follow Dr. Samir on Instagram. Check out our website if you are looking to get unstuck, whether you're an individual or you're married, you have kids. I definitely recommend her. And until next time, take care of yourself. And thank you again, Dr. Samira, for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.